Hey, the Spurs won. Let's give some takeaways from the Spurs win versus Portland. Bringing our guest, James Pleasure. He's going to be talking with me if the Spurs have entered phase 2 of this current rebuild plan.
You are Locked On Spurs, your daily San Antonio Spurs podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, this is Hot Rod.
And I'm RC from the San Antonio Spurs.
And you're listening to Locked On Spurs with Jeff Garcia.
Welcome back to Locked On Spurs right here on the Locked On NBA Network. I'm your host, Jeff Garcia, Spurs writer for Ken's 5 San Antonio, your host of Locked On Spurs. Hey, we thank you for making Locked On Spurs your first listen each and every day, free and available wherever you get podcasts. Ken's 5 Plus, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, the list goes on and on. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA. You want to go to that website right now. Use the code in all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. What are we talking about today? We're looking at brace yourself, a Spurs win. Not kidding. The Spurs beat the Blazers. Give some takeaways. There's a lot of good things that happened in that game. I'll give you some of the three of the best ones. And then bring in our guest, San Antonio Sports Stars' very own James Pleasure. He's going to round out the year with me right here on Locked On Spurs. We're going to be discussing kind of a broad topic. If the Spurs have entered phase 2 of their rebuild, and that is about player evaluations. Talking about that up next. But your Spurs, about last night, got that W. Yes, I'm not kidding. They beat the Blazers on the road 118-105. Spurs moved to 5-25 on the season. They'll play the Blazers tomorrow night again, or tonight by the time we're looking at this episode, tonight in Portland. So what went right for San Antonio? Well, can we talk about Wemby? That's got to start it off there. Historic night for Wembanyama. Remember, he's 19 years old, everybody. This kid, 30 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists. Shall I go on? Of course I'll go on. 2 3-point shots made, 64% for the field, and 24 minutes and hit all of his free throws, 10 for 10. Why is he the number one takeaway? But because he and the rest of the team finally were force-feeding him. They were feeding him the ball, finding him on pick and rolls, finding him near the rim. He was getting easy buckets, being an defensive force, being an offensive force. He did it all. He filled the stat sheet. And the Spurs have been recognizing that they need to get him involved more, and they certainly did that last night versus Portland. Yes, he had a phenomenal game. You want to see if they're going to continue this. He was finding the right spots. The Spurs were finding him on his right spots. He was doing it all, even picked up a charge. Wemby, what a night for him. Now, you just hope that this continues moving forward, that they just give him the ball and get out of the way. He had 14 field goal attempts on the night. So, they definitely were making Wemby number one option. Keep that up, Spurs. That's the first takeaway and why the Spurs got a big W. Second takeaway is they're the team that came out and punched first. And boy, did they punch Portland in the mouth. The Spurs outscored the Blazers 38-14 in the opening frame. That's the type of aggressiveness you want to see out of this young team. That's how you want to see this young team start games. None of this falling behind early and playing catch up or tied at the first. They were the aggressors versus Portland. They came out with the statement, and boy, did they carry that momentum over. The Spurs came out looking strong. They were making strong plays. Matter of fact, strong play was a phrase that Coach Mitch Johnson said after the game, saying the team just made a lot of strong plays, finding the cutters, weathering the storm from Portland. So all in all, you love the way the Spurs started the game. That's takeaway number 2. Third takeaway is they sustained their lead. Yes, the Spurs had a 20-plus point lead versus Portland. Believe it or not, the Spurs' biggest lead was 28 points over the Blazers. And although the Spurs did see that 20-point lead dwindle, I think it went down to 10, the Spurs weathered the storm. They stayed together. They didn't wilt. What's the old thing this season? Oh, just wait till the second half. Wait till that third quarter. That's when the Spurs will implode. Well, guess what? They did not implode. They got close. The third period, they came out very shaky. I believe they were shooting about 29% in that third frame, but they were able to maintain their lead, keep Portland on their heels, and lo and behold, it'll work. Spurs got the W. You got contributions from everybody. You had Sohan with 16 points. You had Devin Vassell with 17 points. Malachi Branham with 13 points. Off the bench, Zach Collins with 11 points and 7 rebounds. All in all, just a great overall effort. If you're looking for signs of improvement and team maturity, you're hoping that the win versus the Blazers will propel them. Let's not rest on their laurels. They got one win. It's their 5th win in the season. They got one win tonight in this back-to-back versus Portland. Now to see if they can continue this. So I think that's up next for the Spurs. Can they maintain the momentum? All right. That's it. Spurs got the W. But coming up next, we're going to bring in our guest. He is James Pledger of San Antonio Sports Star. We're going to be discussing phase 2 of the rebuild. And if we're in it right now, and that is player evaluations. That's coming up next on Locked On Spurs. But first, I want to talk to you about PrizePicks. Hey, you got to go to PrizePicks right now. It is the daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It is the largest, by the way. They are the easiest, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just you against the numbers. You have to worry about the sharks. You don't have to worry about the pros. Just you versus the numbers. You pick more than or less than 2 to 6 player projections and watch the winnings roll in. Look, they got it all over at PrizePicks. They offer Apple Pay. That gives you quick and easy deposits into your account this entire basketball season. They have quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, enormous selection of players and stat types that just make PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. The PrizePicks app is really simple to play. You make your picks, you submit the entries in less than 60 seconds. Super easy. Hey, get PrizePicks app right now. Go to the website, prizepicks.com. What are you waiting for? What better way to enjoy the Spurs season by joining in the daily fantasy sports platform that is PrizePicks. You want to go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Code is LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. And we're back right here on Locked On Spurs to close out 2023. I couldn't think of anybody better because if you look at the Locked On Spurs guest roster, it's actually Pledger that is the most senior, the most tenured Locked On Spurs guest. So I figured what fitting way to end 2023 right here on Los with the guy who's been there from the beginning, James Pledger of San Antonio Sports Star. Follow him on X at @IamPledger. And I see you wearing the old throwback Oilers uniform. I'm pretty sure you didn't like what Tennessee did, huh?
I didn't, but it was expected. Bud Adams is a very petty man, and he's passed that down to his daughter, apparently, who is now in control of the team. So, Art Modell left the Browns and everything to the city of Cleveland, and he just started anew with the Ravens in Baltimore when he moved that franchise.
Yeah.
Bud Adams did not feel the same way about the city of Houston. And because of that, the city of Houston does not feel the same about Bud Adams.
Yeah. We could
just imagine, and I'm not saying this would happen, whatever. But we saw SS&E Holt sell off the Rampage.
Yep.
They are now the affiliate of the Golden Knights, by the way, won a title. We've seen the Las Vegas Aces get sold off to Las Vegas.
Yep.
Won a title. Imagine if he relocated San Antonio to Las Vegas, took the name with him to where whatever expansion team came could not have the Spurs anymore.
Yeah, kind of like what Seattle did with the Oklahoma City Thunder, right? They kept the colors, they kept the history, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do believe they are willing to give it back to Seattle if they garner a franchise.
Yeah,
if I've read correctly. So
yeah,
which would be nice. And I'm for the stats and everything. Like, that's the franchise. That's part of it. That's part of your history as an owner of that team. I get it.
Yeah,
but it's also part of the history of the city.
It's part of the history. I know. Well, we're here to discuss Silver and Black, and since James and I are pretty much big Marvel MCU nerds, the concept here, everybody, let's set it up. So, the MCU, they had phase 1. That's the setup of the Avengers leading into phase 2, which was the Infinity War, all that good stuff. So phase 1 for the Spurs in this rebuild could have been tanking and winning the lottery and getting Wemby. Mission accomplished. So we're still in the rebuild. So what would phase 2 be? And Pledger and I, we discussed this, actually now a couple of nights ago on the phone, that phase 2, and Pledger had a brilliant idea here, is player fit with Wemby. And you're starting to see a little bit of that. Keldon maybe doesn't fit well with Wemby on the court, maybe better on the bench. Zach Collins is now off the bench. Where's Wemby position now? You see where this is going? Could we be in phase 2 of the Spurs rebuild? Player eval moving forward. James, this is a really good idea, and I'm on board with this idea. I think that's what we're witnessing right now. The only one that kind of makes me still scratch my head is why Trey Jones isn't with the starting unit. But yeah, we'll leave that for another discussion. But this could be interesting because you have trade deadline ahead, and of course the offseason where the Spurs can be major players. Do you feel, and actually you do feel, but we're pretty much in phase 2 player evals, right?
We're transitioning into phase 2, if that makes sense. You know how there is a big Avengers movie that kicks off and signals the end of one phase and start of another. Right. We're kind of in that point right now because we've seen the big shakeup, if you will, in terms of the fact that we're seeing player movement from the starting lineup that we didn't see, and all that lovey-dovey pops the grandpa, yada, yada, yada. Everybody's doing their best. We're trying hard. Everybody's out there learning, and this is young. To a couple of nights ago, all right, we're done learning, right? Now I need to see this consistency. I've been harping on you guys, and you could hear the frustration with Pop at the podium after that game, and it's warranted because that's where fans have been for a while. Because as a fan, you have to guess the plan because they're not going to be forthright with their intentions, right? And so you have to kind of guess and as educated as possible, find the direction of it. And then it's beholden on us, once we kind of figure out what that plan is, to explain it to the masses. And last year, I went on this show a lot. On my own show, on the Saturday Morning Hangover, and people are always, reluctant to believe the fact that the Spurs were tanking and that it was not willful and that this was not part of a grand plan and that Wemby wasn't at the end of the rainbow. So it was on us to explain, no, there's no legitimate reason why they've stockholded these picks, moved off these great players, stripped it down to nothing, and then as the season started, continued to strip it down to nothing with the moving of Jakob Poeltl and Josh Richardson and the only other good players that were left on the roster at that point outside of the young core. The guys you've drafted or invested heavily in terms of Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell, and Jeremy Sohan at that point. Malachi Branham, Blake Wesley, yada, yada, yada. Now we've transitioned from, all right, or we're in the midst of transitioning from, all right, let's get Wemby. And then we heard at the draft, leading up to the draft, after they drafted him, we don't know what he is. We need to figure out who he is on the court before we can really do anything. And they told us that. And so part of that was not tying yourself to contracts, not going out and spending in free agency when you don't even know what you're spending to surround around at that point in time. Is it a 5? Is it a 4? Is he a 3? Where is he playing? How's he playing? Is he a 5 like the Joker, or is he a 5 like Embiid? Is he a 5 like, or a 4 like Kevin Durant, or a 3 like Kevin Durant maybe? Is he somebody that can play inside out, outside in? How is this best going to work? And then his basketball IQ, how great and willing of a passer he is. They didn't know any of these things outside of what they'd seen with a bunch of guys in France, really, and Spain. They just didn't know, and they didn't know how it would translate to the league, how his game would translate to the league, and once it translated, where he best fit. So I think stage 1 of fit was finding out where Wemby fit. Well, we're starting to get a clearer picture of where Wemby fits, because his stats, plus minus everything, they let him kind of play everywhere. And lately, we're only seeing him play the 5. And by putting him at the 5, that means they move Zach Collins out of the starting lineup into the bench. And his numbers and everything have been great from there. His usage, his shooting percentage, everything has gone up.
Shot up
once they kind of figured out, all right, this is your fit. I know you don't want to be considered and put in a box and be a center, but a center isn't what a center used to be. And you can be a center without the back to the basket, play inside the Yaka Pearl game, right?
Basically, like Joker. Joker's a big example of that.
Yeah,
Joker
he's a 5.
Inside out. Yeah, he's a 5.
He's a 5. He plays outside in and can't. And so I think the fit with Wemby is there. Now it's the fit around Wemby. That's stage 2 of the fit, right?
Yeah.
So stage 2 of phase 2 is, all right, what works? Well, we heard Stacey King from the Bulls play-by-play talk about it. Like, people missing Wemby wide open, whatever. We've heard Devin talk about it post-game, like, I'm wide open and it's taken a couple extra dribbles. Wemby, we're missing him low because,
Johan as well. He's recognized it,
And they're late to recognize it. Well, what part of that is Keldon is ball dominant, in a sense, and so is Jeremy Sohan. So you remove Keldon from the starters, you put him off the bench, because I believe Keldon was the first choice because Pop's been hard on him. We've heard other players say, man, he rides Keldon like nobody's business, right? That's his new Tony Parker, I guess, in a sense of who he takes the tasks and sets the example with, in a sense. And so Keldon, can take it. You move the demotion to the bench, and it's not even a demotion. You're like, Keldon, I need you to go get points. Go get points. When you're in, the green light is on, and go. And it's working. 26 points the other night, and he's seemingly found a spot, right? Now, the other part of that is they've kind of moved Jeremy from the 1 to the 4, it looks like. In a sense. So that's another part of what fits. So let's keep them in the starting lineup, but let's not have them control the offense. So there's kind of
and you're seeing also too the addition of Champagne in the starting unit. Why? Because they need perimeter threat. He's perhaps one of their better perimeter threats
outside of Devin Vassell.
So you're seeing that mix up, and to me, with phase 2,
and Champagne is also a guy that, if you look at it, he's a perimeter threat, but he can also take it to the rack and score. Doug and Seti are perimeter threats for the most part, and you kind of need to get them the ball in spots and whatnot. Champagne is a guy who can take what he gets, right?
And he knows his role. That's what I like.
Exactly.
I think he knows his role. He will defer to Wemby if needed.
And so you got that, and now you've got Malachi, who you've invested a first-round draft pick in, and you're trying that at the point. still some of the issues persist with point guard. Will we see Blake Wesley before Trey Jones? I don't know, but it looks like it's trending towards eventually we will see Trey Jones in the starting lineup. I have no doubt. Like at some point this season, we are going to see it. Mm-hmm. And so right now it's about what fits around Wemby and do you fit or do you need to be shipped?
And this should not come to any surprise because remember last season to end the season, what did Pop say? The only person that we know will be back, in a starting unit was Zach at that time. So even then, to close out last season, he's signaling to the rest of the roster, we're watching you. We're keeping an eye on you.
And think about it. You've got to figure out what fit. And I talked once they went young like this and didn't bring in a veteran, it was about figuring out what fits with Wemby. And the first part of that was figuring out where Wemby fits. Now they've got that. They're trying to figure out the rest of the puzzle around him. And I think that's kind of going to be the second third of the season if we're doing this in thirds of the season.
Stages,
and if we're doing this as part of, stage 2, stage 3 of the MCU. So 2 is going to lead up to the trade deadline, obviously.
Yep. And that's
you're playing for your job every night, it seems.
Yeah, and that's a perfect way to take our first break. When we get back, we're going to talk about the trade deadline that's ahead. Shock everybody. This name that Pledger's going to bring up shouldn't shock you at all. He's been a fan of this kid for a long time. But, hey, it makes – at this point, I'm with Pledger. I'm like, sure, go for it. You got a war chest of stuff. You might as well use it. So we're going to discuss the trade deadline. What does this phase 2 mean? Player evals for the trade deadline and more coming up next on Locked On Spurs.
Hey, this is Chris Sabat, and you're listening to Locked On Spurs with Jeff Garcia.
Before we continue our conversation, let's talk about FanDuel. You want to go to FanDuel right now, everybody. So as the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot only at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get themselves $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. Again, that's $150 if your team wins. So if you think about joining FanDuel, now's the time to do it. The action is hot. You got the NFL season still kicking in. You still have the NBA season just getting into the halfway point. There's a lot of reasons why you should be joining FanDuel right now. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, go get that app. The app is easy to use. They got a wide range of betting options from spreads, player props, over and unders, so much more. I have it. You should get it too. Hey, go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and keep on cheering for your favorite NFL team or perhaps your favorite NBA team like the Spurs. So again, FanDuel.com/lockedon. Get that app wherever you get your apps, Google Store, Apple, whatever you need. Just go get that app. And of course, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. Also want to talk about Mudslingers Drive-Thru Coffee. Go there right now, San Antonio, 2404 Thousand Oaks Drive in the 281-1604 area. Open every day, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. They have a wide variety of items on that menu. Not only just drinks, they also have mini donuts. And speaking of those drinks, they have so many signature drinks such as the Red Bull Infused Lightning Bolt series. They have the OG OJ, that's the Old Orange Julius, recreated only at Mudslingers Drive-Thru Coffee. If you want to salute Frank Harris for all he did with UTSA, go get the Sub-Zero. That's in honor of him. And, of course, the Alien. We all know who that's about. That's Victor Wembanyama, a drink made just for him in his honor. They got so many good things about that menu. They have dairy alternatives. So, if you need a dairy alternative, they got that for you. They have the signature drink, which is called the Mudslinger. That'll get you introduced into the world of coffee. And look, they're a proud local sponsor of Locked On Spurs, and they're a proud member of the San Antonio community. Friendly staff, big menu. And of course, they are very active on social media, such as X, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. And if you reach out to them and pitch them an idea about a new drink, guess what? They may make it for you and then name it after you. So they're so interactive with fans. That's why they're a joy to go visit, get their items, get a drink from there. So many reasons to go out to Mudslingers. Over 300 5-star reviews cannot be wrong. So once again, 2404 Thousand Oaks Drive. Again, open every day from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Go to Mudslingers right now because life is too short for a bland coffee.
This is Zach Aguilar, the voice of Tanjiro Kamado, and you're listening to Locked On Spurs with Jeff Garcia.
And we're back right here on Locked On Spurs with the Red Hood. Wait, is that the Red Hood? Is that the Red Hood? It's him.
It was 1 year for Halloween.
He worked for Halloween. Yeah, he is James Pledger, San Antonio Sports Star 94.1, host of Extra Innings with Pledger. He'll talk about that shortly. Follow him on X at I am Pledger. So now we're down to the nitty gritty now that trade deadline is fast approaching. We kind of set up what phase 2 could possibly be about, player fit / evaluations. Now, what if some of those players don't fit? Or what if they could be a better fit out of the trade deadline? So, James, I'm a little bird told me that you're a big fan of lower marketing. I don't know why.
Who would have said that?
I don't know. Some guy said this to me. But you pitched the idea of the Spurs going after Lauri. There's rumblings that he could be available. You've been on the Lauri marketing train for quite some time. Why should he be a target for the Spurs?
I mean, he helps provide more perimeter shooting if you want it. He can also take it inside. He gives Victor a running mate to run with, and veterans, man. This team just doesn't have any. He's been in the league. He's been on all-star teams. He knows what it's like to be on a bad team going through it, and he knows what it's like to try and pull a team out of that, both in Chicago and in Utah. Utah was a much better team than anybody gave him credit for last year. And I think that's valuable experience. You pair it with other things, There are a host of players that it looks like the Utah Jazz are going to make available at the trade deadline. Lauri Markkanen is one of 4. It also includes Jordan Clarkson, San Antonio's own, and a couple other players that off the top of my head escape me right now, but I read a report that there were 4, all 4 players, good players, could provide an upgrade depth here in San Antonio amongst all else. But you don't stop there. You look at, Alex Caruso on the Bulls, maybe if they're trying to sell, Pascal Siakam up in Toronto. They've been trying to move him for a couple of years and let that become the OG Anunoby, or they're trying to hand that thing over to Williams, but I just keep waiting for them to pull the plug on OG and Pascal because they always seem to be on the block every year.
They remind me of the John Collins. Remember how John Collins from Atlanta was on the block
John
for
Collins
every single year?
The other name in Utah
well, look, there he is. We're back at John Collins again.
We're back at John Collins, but he was another one of the names on the list. DeAndre Hunter, what's his fit in Atlanta now with, they've invested so much at that position on its own. Point guards around the league. You got to do something at the trade deadline. Now, that may just be as simple as acquiring more picks, but what good are all these picks if you don't pay it off? Because at some point, you're punting on players after a year with the amount of picks they've accumulated, right? I mean, you look at just the sheer number, it's unsustainable. You only get 15 guys on an active roster and stashing a couple in Austin every year. Other than that, you can't consistently, unless you're Wesley, Malachi, Jeremy. This is their second year. You're punting on them after this year at some point, unless you're just jettisoning all of your veterans and you're only going to play with young kids until they figure it out themselves, which feels like a fool's errand, because how can you teach championship winning NBA basketball in today's NBA if nobody on your team's ever done it?
Yeah, and also too, there's the idea of just chemistry. I mean, look at the Magic. That group has kind of been together with Banchero and Mo Wagner. And those kids, and look, I think what the Wagner said in a press conference recently that he goes, it took us 2 to 3 years to get to this point.
Yeah.
But for me, it's just, I would hate the Spurs to hit a reset on a reset on a reset, because eventually, James, you got to run with these kids. You got to see what can they do a full season, another season together. Yeah. I think that's another part of the phase. We're seeing that. So we saw them together last year, tank season. You added Wemby. We're still seeing them together. So, yeah, I would say perhaps one more season with this crew, unless you feel that this roster is going to be different after the trade deadline, or especially in the offseason. Where do you stand on that?
I believe it's different. How different remains to be seen, but there are names that I believe could be traded. Of course, Seti, Doug, those are the obvious. Those are, the low-hanging fruits.
Mm-hmm.
Keldon could be a possibility at some point, depending what we see from Jeremy moving forward. Could he be a piece that they move off of? A former top 10 pick that you still potentially hold some weight with his potential. So that's something that another team may look at as a young piece in return that, is at least worthy.
And he could fetch a good return. I think he really can. Yeah.
But I mean, those are just for the names but outside of Wemby and, I'll asterisk Devin, I don't think anybody on this roster is untouchable, and that includes Devin. Like, I think if the price is right, Devin would be somebody that they could move from, and with good reason. I mean, look, I love Devin. I think world of Devin. He is their. Yeah, I don't even think it's arguable. I think he's their best 3-point shooter, and I think he adds more value than just his 3-point shot, where Seti and Doug are just about the 3 and stretching the floor. Devin adds so much more and can do so much more.
And he's a better running mate with Wemby right now.
And a great defender, too.
And a really better running mate with Wemby, because I think, as you mentioned, Keldon is very ball dominant. I think Devin is a little bit more apt to mix well with Wemby. Not saying that Keldon and Sohan and everybody else are intentionally not mixing well with him. I just think it flows better with those two guys. But
this is what it's about. Find the young that fits and then build around that. I mean, that's kind of what...
Do you think the Spurs will be active at the trade deadline?
Yeah.
Buyers or sellers?
Sellers.
Sellers? Okay. Yeah.
Like, if there's one thing I can guarantee, it's a seller. I can't guarantee a buy, but I can guarantee a sell. Even if it's just one piece, like a Doug or a Seti or whatever it may be, for picks or taking on an expiring contract and helping a contender with the perimeter offense. Like, that feels almost like a lock if you were to try and lock something in for the upcoming NBA trade deadline. That feels like the certainty, the thing you can almost guarantee. Like, if you're going to put something in Vegas, money on, Spurs make a move by the trade deadline.
Oh, yeah. And also, too, another reason why I don't think they'll be buyers, because at this point of the season, it's already a wash. Why even just...
And most buyers are people that are trying to build the roster for a run at the title that year.
Exactly.
And usually it's about a player that's in a contract year.
Absolutely. All right. We'll see what the Spurs do at the trade deadline, but there's so much talk about the Spurs as we close out 2023, moving on to 2024. What will 2024 bring to the Spurs? I'm going to go on a limb here, pledge to say a lot more L's. So we're going to see a lot more L's probably in the new year.
That's mean. That's mean. You want to start the new year like that?
All right. We're going to start the new year
like that.
Well, technically, we're not in the new year yet. So.
Oh, you want to close the year like that?
I mean, look at the way the Spurs are closing out the year. So I'm with them right now.
You get what you give, right?
Yeah. You give me L's. That's what I'm going to expect from you, L's. But he is James Pleasure with San Antonio Sports Star 94.1 on the radio dial. We need to know everything about extra innings, the blitz, all the shows you all got cooking out there.
Well, there's a lot of this. We talk about the future of the Spurs, what's going on, how it may have changed, how my perception may have changed, which is why he came up with, the stage of the rebuild, like where they're at. Like they're trying to sell tickets. Yeah, but the Dallas Cowboys, they're making a push for the playoffs. The Houston Texans are making a push for the playoffs. So we've got that. The Texas Longhorns, they're in the college football playoff. They're playing in the semifinals on New Year's Day. So we've got that going for us. I mean, there's just so much happening in sports right now, and so many big, local, juicy things to grab onto that whether it is the Texans push for the playoffs, the Cowboys, and whether they can do it or not, the Spurs, and just trying to figure out what is going on there on the daily basis. And of course, the Texas Longhorns, like it's a stacked full of just topics to just graze on right now, which is really the best thing.
Absolutely. Check out Extra Innings with Pleasure. I think, when are you coming back? Because you're on a hiatus a little bit, right?
For a little bit. Come back on the 2nd, and it's 2nd and 3rd. Rob is still out, so I'll be in with Rudy on R&R in the morning, starting at 6 in the mornings. And then, of course, Extra Innings with Pleasure that night, later the night.
But he's a hardworking man, and that's why we love having him on here on Locked On Spurs. Again, follow him on X at @IamPleasure, and check out Extra Innings with Pleasure on 94.1. Pleasure, thank you for closing out Locked On Spurs year 2023. You are the most tenured, the most seasoned guest on Locked On Spurs.
Crazy to think about.
It's you.
Appreciate you, Jeff, as always. I appreciate you. I appreciate all of the fans at Locked On Spurs and all the listeners and everybody out there. Have a safe, happy New Year. Enjoy yourself. Good tidings to everyone in the new year, and best wishes. And don't think I didn't see that nice placement of the Iron Man display right there over your shoulder.
Let me show you the big screen. There we go.
Don't think I didn't notice that.
Look at that.
It's beautiful.
Watch. You want to test Pleasure's knowledge? Check this out. What armor is that he's wearing?
That's his extremis armor.
It's like, some guys are really good at cars. They can look at a car and be like, that's such and such model with such and such horsepower with this type of leather. That's the same thing with Pleasure and Iron Man. His armor. He can name every single Mark suit that Tony Stark owned, like that on a dime. But that's why I love him.
I have a lot of useless knowledge spinning around up here.
I always say that useless nerd knowledge comes in handy. It really does. No more nerd talk. We're gonna let James go. Hey, thanks for making Locked On Spurs your first listen each and every day. Free and available wherever you get podcasts, Google Play, 10's5 Plus app, Spotify, iTunes. We'll be back in the new year on Tuesday. Casey Vieira will be kicking off the new year with us here on Locked On. Ish, because it's not a Tuesday, but you get what I'm saying, everybody. So he'll be joining us on the next episode next week. So for James Pleasure, a.k.a. the Red Hood, I am Jeff Garcia. We're going to put a lock in this episode of Locked On Spurs.